Hi, I'm Jody, and I'm interviewing my friends because I think they're some of the greatest people in the world.
So today's friend happens to be, this is not planned, by the way, to have three book club friends pretty much in a row. It happened just because I adore and love these humans so much that I wanted to get them all on, and this has just worked out with availability. And also, this special person, again, a book club friend that I had met, but she has such a compelling and interesting story about just being a woman in the corporate world. Following up from some of the conversations that we just had, this was like the best timing ever. What's your name?
Hi, I'm Vicki Reese-Jones, one of the three Victorias in the book club. Yes.
Okay, I am not, I think the name is so beautiful, but it is random to have three Victorias in one book club that's like 15 people.
I know. Well, we are lucky that we have the Vicky, the Tori, and the Victoria.
Where do you live?
I live in Point Breeze, Philadelphia.
And what do you do?
I'm a graphic designer and I own my own creative consulting agency.
Okay, so my favorite question, what are you an expert at?
So I know this is a question that you ask every time. So this is funny because I actually did wind up chewing on this for a while. Because as we'll get into, like corporate Vicky would have had my little elevator 3 sentence pitch of everything I'm supposed to do. And since starting my own business, I try to not define myself so much through my work, which is so hard because especially our generation, we're taught like your work is what you do. So I thought about it, and the way I describe myself to clients sometimes is I'm very good at being calculated but creative. So I'm a graphic designer by trade and I have all those creative juices, but because of the journey it took me to be a full-time graphic designer, I got all these skills like business development, project management, sales that allow me to see the operational side of things and not just go crazy with everything I want to do creatively. So I think that like juxtaposition makes me an expert at being calculated and creative.
For you just to kind of share your, I guess we'll call it your professional journey that you've had over the course of the last few years, because it's a lot.
Yeah. So as I said, I'm a graphic designer now. That is not always what I was. I always loved design and art and the creative process. I was the editor-in-chief of my high school yearbook. I went to college for journalism and found myself caring more about like the layout versus the articles I was writing. And then, long story short, my first internship I got in college was for a sports agency, doing marketing materials for them. And I think that whatever my first internship would have been, that's going to be what my career path was, regardless of what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
So then that's when I worked in sports and entertainment. And after
Hence the flyers.
got the flyers, we got the concert posters. Like this is the corporate past of Vicki Reese-Jones. One thing that's kind of unfortunate about the sports entertainment industry is you get pushed into the sales bucket if you're talkative and know how to converse. And for me, as someone who wanted to go into marketing and design, I was told start in sales, get your foot in the door, and then eventually you'll be able to be the designer that you want to be. You'll put your PR degree to use, et cetera, et cetera. And then decades later, I was still not doing that. And I finally got to a point where I could be a little more design adjacent. I was doing it's called sales production support. So like, again, like corporate materials, RFP responses, but it was also so tied in with all these other things that weren't my passion at all.
Mhm.
But in my mind, I'd gone so far down that rabbit hole. It's like, I missed that exit on the highway like 10 stops ago. This is my life.
Mhm. Yeah.
And it got to the point where, as someone who does find so much of my identity through my work, that I was feeling like I was lost, right? Like I was still doing a good job, but I didn't feel good about my work. I wasn't getting like the same pride of it. I wasn't, it wasn't something that was bringing me happiness anymore. So then eventually, after a very long process of determining what to do, it was a week after my 5-year anniversary with my last big corporation. I quit with no job lined up and decided to start my own business with just a hope that it was going to work out. And it worked out really well. And now I will always advocate when people are like unhappy at their jobs. I'm like, don't listen to anyone. You'll figure it out. You're a smart person. It'll work out eventually. It's just scary at first, right? Yeah, and that was 4.5 years ago, and I don't think I can work for anyone else ever again. I think this is it.
This is it. It is terrifying to me even to kind of consider doing it's so brave. I hope you realize how brave that is to just take that leap and then believe in yourself enough to want to start your own thing.
I appreciate that. And I think I like that that's the perception. I will be candid that there was so much imposter syndrome. I think that there was enough believing in myself to make it like, let's just see what happens. But 95% of me was like, oh God, oh God, oh God. You know? So it took probably 3 years of running the business before I truly said confidently, like, I'm doing it. Even though I was paying my bills through my business, I had clients, I was just like, they're going to figure it out eventually that this is all made up, right? But it's not.
I'm sure you got a lot of advice, a lot of unsolicited advice.
Yes.
Was any of it good? Was any of it useful?
So there was one useful one. So a majority of it was because I left and started my own job before like COVID happened and people were just like, well, no one's working for a year. Like a lot of people had gaps. So a lot of the like old school mentality was you can't quit your job if you don't have anything else lined up. And you certainly can't quit your job to start a business that's just adjacent to what you've been doing the last, 10 years. Because what happens if it doesn't work out and people are going to ask, well, where's this gap and that type of thing. But the one piece of advice that actually was helpful was from my boyfriend, Ben. So he was a big proponent for me starting my own business just because he probably believed in me more than I believed in myself.
We love a supportive partner.
Love a supportive partner. But he was, kind of saying that I was losing my light and losing my motivation just because of being so beaten down by the corporate world, that he's like, if you quit, do whatever you want, just do something that you love doing and that you know that you can be the best at. So when I first quit my job, because I've worked ever since I was 14, I got so antsy right away that I wound up actually being a barista. After being as burnt out as I was, like my first week there, I still had a little of that like corporate residue of just everything is bad at all times. And one of the people said to me, he's like, end of the day, it's just coffee. And that was another good piece of advice about leaving. Like, it's just coffee at the end of the day, right? Like we get so worked up. So I will put that in the good advice column. And then Ben's good advice was when I was starting to get very stressed about starting the business, he goes, again, end of the day, you could be a barista forever. If you enjoy being a barista and you think you're good at it, just go be the best damn barista you can be. He's like, don't focus on the shoulds and shouldn'ts. Pick your path that you want and just be the best you can be at it.
I'm going to ask you somewhat of a personal question that I don't usually ask, but I kind of gave you ahead of time. Are you willing to share how old you are?
I'm 33 years old.
Okay. The reason I'm asking is because my ancient ass over here is very impressed that I was basically trying to get home from the bar at a reasonable hour at 33 and not really thinking. So to hear that you were able to take this amazing leap and start your own thing at that age, I find really inspiring. And I'm curious if that ever became a issue, if anybody ever thought, hey, she's young, or did age ever play a factor in the way that people treated you as you were on this journey?
That's a great question. I think that kind of goes into the imposter syndrome of it all. Because it's true, oftentimes I'm in meetings especially with some of the companies I work with now I am the decision maker on my side. but the person on the other end is, 30 plus more years experience than me. But the age factor, I think, never came up in my specific job because like creatives are supposed to be like young and kooky, right? And also because of my corporate background, I work for a Fortune 50 company, I believe. I was so trained to be the right amount of professionalism based on the people around me. So I think I can present much older than I am. And all the things about being concerned about age usually are just up here. I've never had anyone externally say, you're a little young for this.
Yeah, you're right. It is all up here, which is
Yeah.
the other side of this is just being a woman though, starting
Oh,
your
that's
own.
a huge, yeah.
What
That
about in that area? Face any challenges?
I think those challenges are ones that women see in every workplace, right? Where even though my role on a team is as the designer or the content creator, naturally I'm going to be the one to take notes during a meeting, right? Like items like that. Whereas now I can at least say, well, you're going to do that. Like, well, that's not part of what my project scope was with you all. So like, we're going to need to reevaluate this. I have to think of myself as my employee, right? And because that makes it so much better because we're so much nicer to other people than we are ourselves.
I
And I'm like,
know.
would I want this client to say this to my employee, not Vicki Reese Jones, like the employee of Hyphen Creative Services. And that's helped me like restructure my brain a bit of setting boundaries because owning your own business, I'm terrible with boundaries. I always want to say yes. I always want to help. I'm more value motivated than money motivated. So I want to do a good job more than I want to make money. And it's made it so I put myself in a lot of situations that made me very little money and caused me very high stress when starting a business. So kind of restructuring it of taking care of my employee, having a inclusive workforce and my little workforce made it so I could set good boundaries and not have the pitfalls that tend to happen in women in industries, although they always will.
Tell me about when you got the business up and running and things were kind of humming along. What surprises did you encounter that made you maybe, stop in your tracks for a second? Was there anything that shocked you?
This is I have the exact answer for this. It's funny.
I love it.
This is gonna show how jaded I got in the corporate world. So little, warning for that is I had gotten to a point where I just thought like no one cared about other people. You are and just a part of the cog and you just need to turn and do your right thing. But when I started my own business, it was fascinating how many people also have small businesses and how many people want to support other small businesses. I was so lucky that I had referrals right away. But then even when I got beyond that point, people enjoyed saying like, oh, I think I know someone who might need you and making connections or like, I've never started a business before. You can only Google something so much. But people that were loosely associated with me sitting down and talking through, should I be an LLC or an SP or an S Corp? And these are what I would normally do if I have issues with a contract. And it was just like so fascinating to see this whole ecosystem that exists of people breaking from this, corporate hierarchy that we were all trained to be part of and how like much more warm and welcoming the community can be. Like I find my workforce now to be so supportive and like collaborative and I never really got that when I was working for these giant companies that pay a ton of money to have resources.
Yeah.
So it's just anyone who's, I'm just going to say it, I'll probably say it's like 10 times during our call, anyone who wants to start a business, I will tell you some things that would make me determine whether I think would actually like it. But like, there's nothing to be scared about because like so many people will like gladly hold your hand for any scary moment. I still have people hold my hand every now and again when I get a new situation going. And it's just so nice.
So what are the things that you would help you determine whether or not you were ready to start your business? Give me like two. I'm curious.
So one I always ask people is like, what was your work history like? Like, have you worked at the same company for 20 years, or did you get bored after a job every 2 years and wind up bopping around a lot? Because I think that a big thing, and you work remotely as well, so you'll understand this, is some people need to be part of a team.
Yeah.
And people that, especially again in our generation where you don't have those like lifers anymore, people that will stay at a company for 5+ years care about that culture and camaraderie and care about like the bigger picture.
Right.
Whereas there's a lot of people that, stay at a job for 2 years and then it's not quite doing it for them anymore and they bop around a bit more. Those people would thrive, in my opinion, starting their own business, because when I get bored with what my work responsibilities are now, I can redefine what my role is, right? I don't have to rely on another entity to help me mold into what I want to evolve into.
Mm.
So I think that's kind of the biggest one, is people that do well in one structure for a long period of time. It might be a little too free flowing to just say, hey, here you go, because my job every 2 months has a different focus, right? So the second thing that I always talk to people about is, a lot of people have this like misconception that you have to be a very strong-willed self-motivator to start a business. And that's not at all what I normally talk to people about when they ask, because I am not at all a self-motivator. Like, my drive is A, deadlines, which is great for what I do, but B, I like being, part of accomplishing a goal for other people. I want to make you happy more so than I want to be accomplished. But I think the important thing is knowing what drives you and knowing how to play into what drives you. So if I ask you, what motivates you to accomplish a task that you really don't want to do, and you have to think about it for a while, then like you need a little more like inner thinking before you go and start your own business. Because days when I didn't want to do stuff, I knew how to motivate myself to take that next step. Whereas when you work for someone else, you're stuck there for 8 hours, so you might as well do it. I could just as easily tell myself to go do a load of laundry, but I found ways to keep myself motivated to reach the goals without just relying on me. Does that make sense?
Makes complete sense. You mentioned remote working, and I wanted to make sure we got that in, but give me one of your best tips for being a remote worker. I've been doing it for 7 years now, and so I've learned a lot about what I like and what I don't like. But I would love to hear. Just give us like one good work from home tip.
Have you heard of FocusMate?
No.
Okay. Free plug for FocusMate. Me, as someone who can get easily distracted, especially if it's a project I don't want to do. This goes back to knowing my motivations. There's this free, you can pay to like use it more, but there's this free thing called FocusMate where you schedule a time block that you want to work. You put what you want to accomplish during that time. You log on and you're on essentially a Zoom with someone else. You don't talk at all. You just say hello. And then you know that someone else is working on the other end.
What?
It's phenomenal. It is like, more often than not, like I sometimes will tell them they can keep their speakers on. Mostly people will mute themselves, but like sometimes hearing someone else or seeing someone else work, and me being motivated by other people, they know that I said I was going to accomplish this during this hour. So like now it's time to work. And it's free. So even if you just have like one project you're really kicking the can down the road on, go onto FocusMate, say that you're going to work on that project, and then you'll just be with like someone random around the world also working. And it's so good to keep you motivated. I love it.
That is a fantastic tip.
What's your big work from home one? I need to know. I know I wasn't going to ask any questions, but I kind of always want to know this with people who work from home full time.
My biggest tip is figuring out the hours where you're least productive.
Yes.
Like I had to figure that out for myself. For me, it's like around 1 to 3, 2 to 4. Those hours are not useful for me. So I stopped scheduling meetings. If I could, it's not always possible. But if I'm able, I do not schedule meetings during those times. And I use that time to like walk the dogs or do lunch or whatever I need to do.
Yeah.
And I stopped forcing myself to sit in front of my computer consecutively for 8 hours because I will never be a productive worker that way. But if I
Yes.
work 8 to 10, take a little break, come back, work 11 to 1, take a little break, come back at 3, work 3 to 6 or whatever. If I break my day up, I am much more productive. I am a much better worker. I think you're doing amazing. I am so unbelievably inspired by you, and it's just awesome and fantastic. And I'm so grateful that you got to talk to me today. Thank you.
I had so much fun talking to you. Thank you so much. And anyone, if you want to start your business, contact me. I will give you any bit of advice, not unsolicited, you want.